Yo, what's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how I made this ILLENIUM style song. This is going to be a pretty detailed video, so if you wanted to skip ahead to certain parts, I'll have that in the comments so you can just use the little timestamps. But aside from that, we'll get into the drums and I'll show you how I use samples and how I mix them as well. So first thing I've got on all the drums is just a bus compressor, and this is just gluing everything together. It's on the glue preset. So like very subtle amount of compression there. And then we go to the second group. I don't know why I grouped it twice, but I have anyway. We have the 1176 compressor from Universal Audio. This is my favorite kind of compressor for drums. This is on the highest ratio. Attack and release is really fast. And yeah, it's doing about 5 dB of compression. If I turn it off, this is what it sounds like without. So you'll find when it's off, the kick and the snare are just too loud and the rest of the percussion and stuff kind of gets drowned out a little bit. So this brings everything up into the same level and gives it that kind of distinct sound the 1176 has. We've just got a filter as well, slowly working its way up till the second verse where the drums open up more. Yeah, layering. So we have the first track here is a sidechain track. This is solely used just to trigger the sidechain compression. I use a really quick sample and I've faded it out, if you can see here. So that way the transient's very sharp, which gives me a little bit more control over the compression when I'm dialing in numbers. We've got a kick thump here. This is just for the bottom end of the kick, a few reverse parts of it as well. And then we have the main kick. This is a remake. I kind of tried to remake ILLENIUM's kick in his Disarm You remix. That's kind of where I first heard that drum style, and I just remade that for this video. This is what it sounds like together. And then we have just a snare kind of filtered out again. It's more Foley actually than anything. And then the second thing here is I kind of cheated. I just used his stem from, I think it's his stem or his Skio remix pack or something. I just got a bit lazy throughout this song, so I just chucked in a few ILLENIUM samples. But essentially this is just filling out more room. It's a really reverby kind of hit or rim hit or whatever, so that's what that's for. We have a hi-hat that doesn't really do anything until the second verse. It opens up a lot more. And then just a Kashmir Indian drum loop, which is sidechained. And then that same thing happens, that all opens up in the second verse as well. With this automation, it slowly climbs up to get brighter. In terms of processing on everything, the kick thump is just, filtered out, some automation on it. The Disarm You kick, I filtered out heaps of the bottom end because that's kind of been filled with this kick thump. So got rid of all the stuff there. Another hard cut there, and then a resonant frequency that I removed, which I didn't like. We've got a transient master taking a little bit of the attack down just because it was kind of too harsh in my opinion. Snare, nothing, just a filter. Second thing, yeah, just another filter to get rid of the low end. Hi-hats are just filtered heaps to get rid of all the low mid-range. And then this here, if I go to the second verse, this Pro Q is just taking out that really harsh brightness. And this Cashmere sample, another low, like cutting out the low stuff. An Echo Boy, really not doing much, just a bit of room in it. The filter automating up. Transient master taking a lot of attack out. Pro Q, brick wall 80 hertz. That's kind of the number I like to use for anything sub frequencies. So anything below 80 hertz is what I call, you know, sub frequencies. So I like to cut that on things that might be clashing with the sub or any other bass. And then this is just a cut to get rid of some muddiness in this sample as well. And then this audio effect rack is just doing sidechain. If we go to the second verse, there's not really much else. Reused a lot of the same samples. We just have some more snares in here. So the layering here, I've done the main snare, just a cut. Second one's a pre-shifted clap to give it some stereo width and a bit of movement. And then this one here is like primarily a room reverby kind of snare. So if I put these three on, and then we'll add on the stem and the Foley hit. So yeah, that's the snare. It sounds really good. Just got some hi-hats. This is a stem again. It's just a shaker from ILLENIUM's remix competition. This is just a hi-hat sample I cut up. So with these all on. Yeah, that's the verse. Build, we just have some simple claps and snares and all that, just kind of filtering in and out. So this first one, filter's just opening up and then taking out the low end at the very end of that build up, taking, yeah, low end out. Clap, high pan right, just for some rhythm, and then this little, I don't know, percussive thing in doing something. This is just a stem again, but you can hear in his stem how he filters out the low end and makes it brighter over time, which is what this top snare is doing. Just another sample that I cut up to fit the rhythm, and then we have two just trap claps, one of them panned right and then one of them panned left. And that's just for some stereo width and a bit of energy for the build. And then we'll just go lastly to the chorus drums. So same kicks here, I've just added one more sample. This one's really distorted. I just wanted a bit more crunch in the kick for the chorus, so that's why I did that. Verse, snares, reusing a lot of the same stuff. This is different. I used his stem again, just more for room and reverb. Hi-hats, yeah, hi-hats again. So the only thing that's really different is the rides as well. So we have a mid ride and then a high ride. And I think that's everything there. So if I solo it, yeah, so that's all the drum samples. There's a little fill in there, but that's easy enough to do. I don't even have to explain that. Just using tom samples and mucking around with it. Alright, so we'll go to the guitar. This is just a sample pack, a sample from a sample pack, ESW, which I've just filtered up into the first verse. Second layer is a reverbed one. So just Valhalla Vintage, a cut again, yeah, just taking out some resonances here. If I turn it off, you might hear it. You need a good set of headphones or speakers if you want to hear a lot of these frequencies, but I know YouTube compression's shit, so that makes it pretty hard. Last layer is just a sample in the same pack with just a delay on it to make it stereo. Moving on, a string kind of thing following the intro, and then just doubling the octaves up for the verse. This is just a Contact Arcus preset. Arcus is a really sick, I guess you'd call it a plugin. It's one of my favorites for like orchestral kind of textures and sounds. I bought it as soon as it came out, and it's a nice plugin to have. And then we just have, yeah, aside from that, we've got a piano, filtering again, Replica XT, that's just a reverb with a I used a preset for it. Contact piano, some sidechain here. That's pretty much it. We have a cello with sidechain again for the second verse. This is, I think, yeah, so this is the same cello here. I just reversed it and like drowned it in reverb and then low cut. And then I just used that same sound, put it back to its normal speed, or its normal, yeah, reverse it the second time, I guess, and use that kind of as a stab. And with a different reverb preset. So this one's like really sparkly and weird. This is just a layer for ambience. And then we have the silence patch. This I kind of took from ILLENIUM's live stream for one of his live streams. I essentially just remade his whole chain, and kind of taught myself how to make that really nice sound. Yeah, it's just a saw sine wave patch. I think the biggest thing is all of the EQ going on, and the reverb and the OTT and compression, all of that. If this sound didn't have any of that, the sound would sound garbage. So processing is huge for like these type of sounds if you want to achieve it. Anyway, we'll go to the main stack. This one definitely took me the longest. I've got it grouped to two groups again for some reason. So we have a solid EQ doing some low mid frequency boosting and high mid. Sometimes I like to use this EQ to get specific, like I don't really use it to cut, I use it more to boost. It's a very gentle sounding EQ, this one. It's not too harsh, and you can kind of push these frequencies kind of subtly and it doesn't sound bad. So I like this EQ. And then we have the Pultec EQ as well. This one is giving it some bottom end. What else is it doing? It's boosting a lot. 16K. So this little trick here, I'm sure people who use this EQ know exactly what it is, but for those who don't, essentially you're boosting and attenuating the same frequencies, and it actually does something beneficial. It kind of gives it a kind of unique coloration to it, and also kind of sounds like it's compressing that frequency at the same time in a really unique way. So yeah, sometimes I like to do that if I want to just get a little bit of a different sound in that frequency range. So that's what that's doing. Pro Q, just giving a little boost for some high end. It's utility just to take some gain out. This OTT is an ILLENIUM OTT that I just roughly made by ear to how he kind of uses his OTT. It's essentially just the Ableton multiband OTT preset, and I've just tweaked some parameters in the attack release time and possibly input output as well. This is a sidechain, so let's ignore that. And then this is just a filter which just fades, just filters out at the very end, just as a way of transitioning to the next part of the song if I did that. So the next group, we have a mid-side EQ. If you didn't know how to do that, you go into, it's normally on stereo, you go mid-side, and you can individually EQ the mid frequencies and the side frequencies. So I didn't actually touch the mid. They're all flat. I just touched the side. I did a bit of a cut at 1000 hertz and a little boost at 11,000 kilohertz. Pro C, let's see what this does. I don't think it's doing anything. I might have just used it for gain, possibly. I have no idea. Tape, just for some saturation. This is soft tube tape. It's one of my favorites. It's the most subtle sounding tape I have, which you don't really need a tape plug-in to get this bit of saturation, but it's just what I do. I find it kind of brings up the sound overall. I don't know how to explain it. Anyway, it's a nice sounding tape. And then we have a Pro Q doing a boost and a cut just for some unpleasant sounds. And the third and final group is for the main saws. So we have just more EQ, decapitator at a relatively medium to high drive, more OTT, more EQ, blah, blah, blah. R-bass. I've kind of found as I was mixing this that there wasn't enough bottom end at all in these saws, so I just used R-bass to get some of that back. It's probably not the best way to mix, but that's what I did anyway. Same thing, just a shit ton of EQ, mid-side again, and that's just the sidechain compression. Yeah, in terms of each individual sound, everything's kind of frozen because my CPU will die if I unfreeze it, but another side length patch. This is the main saw. OTT, some EQ, that's pretty much it. Second sound is an Omnisphere patch. And that's just a really high, you can use your standard soft synth if you want to get that sound. I just used Omnisphere because I just bought it at the time of doing this. Second one here is a really fucked patch. Another Omnisphere patch. Decapitator was like maxed out, I'm pretty sure, to get that distortion. We go to the kind of high end part of the synth. So we have the really sparkly one. This is another side length patch, preset, whatever you call it. More EQ, and I used the bit reduction downsampler to get that really high, crispy, downsample sound. And then this is just white noise, which I EQ'd and OTT'd and, I don't know, reduxed as well for some reason. Yeah, so that's all the synth layers, and then the other layers we have some strings, bass guitar, some bass, which we'll get to. So strings is just a contact string ensemble preset, hard panned right for the high end. And then the same exact preset I duplicated, hard panned left, and then just brought the notes down a little lower. So that just fills out the stereo width really nicely. Bass guitar, this is a Rickenbacker bass. It's a really famous bass, and I really like the sound of it. Even for just a contact library, it sounds really good. Although there's a lot of side chains, so it kind of ruins the sound of the bass. But in this particular part of the chorus, it's just acting as a layer. We go to the synth bass. We have two kind of subs. We have the main sub, which is just a massive sub sine wave. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Tube, nothing here, no EQ, just a tube drive. OTT, some EQ, a saturator, and then we have the high sub, I guess. So if you're listening to this song on a phone or a laptop, you just can't hear it. Whereas this distorted sub, focusing more on the low mid range, that's what you can hear on laptops and phones. It just adds a nice layer to the main sub, whilst also serving a purpose of being audible on really shitty devices or headphones. So with them together, second last thing we've got is just some vocal chops. I got a little bit lazy. I didn't actually write any melodies with it. I just used the vocal chops as kind of a brightness layer. So we just have the main one. These are actually just vocal kind of ooze in an ILLENIUM stem pack, and I just obviously repitched it to fit the key of this song, and then just chopped up the samples to make it fit a different groove. So let's have a listen to the first one. So that's pretty simple. I've layered that with the octave up. And then this is a reverb one. So I used Portal and Valhalla Shimmer. Portal is like a granular synthesis from the people who make Arcade. I can't remember the brand name. But it's so cool. It's like one of my favorite plugins for weird glitchy sound effect things. And this is just, I'll just play it on its own. Yeah, so it's like a really dreamy, shimmery kind of vocal layer just sitting in there, which is really nice. And the last thing is just I guess you could kind of call it a vocal melody. I just heard something in the vocal that I wanted to do, and it sounds like this. So you probably recognize that as well, being an ILLENIUM stem. So altogether, vocals sound like this. And we have that on the build, and we have that in the chorus as well. Lastly, just some sound effects. Pretty simple. I actually didn't really do much for the whole part of the song up until like the build and chorus. So we have just an exhaust, which is just like a down lifter sweep thing. I probably used more samples in the sound effects than I needed to, but I just didn't really want to remove things since it already sounded quite decent. So you probably don't need this many sound effects all doing one thing, but I've done that for some reason. So this one here is just another thing. This is like an impact, a very quick impact. Another downlifter, more downlifters, more impacts, blah blah blah. We have a riser. We have this track here is the sound effects stem as well, which I just reused from his stem pack. And this Atmos is like a little sampler I cut up. You would not hear that unless like you knew that was in there. It's just adding, you know, just more layers to kind of fill out the sound and give it more emotion. So yeah, that's the whole production side of it. We'll go into mastering next, and yeah, let's go take a look. Okay, so this is what the mastering session looks like. I just bounced out each individual track that I kind of grouped together. So we have the drums, we have the guitar, we have like strings and keys, which is like the piano and other sounds like that. We have the main synth, we have the bass, vocal chops, and sound effects. I don't think I even touched really. Yeah, okay, so I did a little bit of final mixing like before the mastering, just some things I might have heard as I was mastering. So the drums, I just did a very slight cut here. Main synth, we have a pretty, yeah, almost 3 decibel boost at 16 kilohertz. This EQ would have been just to look at the frequencies, so that's not doing anything. The bass, we have a cut here, 10 dB, so there must have been some sort of muddiness that I didn't catch before in the mix session that I got rid of that time. And then sound effects, I think yeah, same thing, just some frequencies that I thought didn't have to be there that I got rid of. Yeah, so that's all that's the stems. So we'll go on to the mastering chain. This song in particular, I didn't actually, when I was doing it, I didn't master it like I have here. I actually kind of mastered it as I was producing and mixing. That's not something I normally do, but I think the mix was pretty bad and pretty dry on its own, and I couldn't really get the creative ideas for finishing the song with a bad mix. So a lot of these mastering plugins, some of them were in the mix session already, in terms of like EQ and stuff, there would have been probably a lot of that in the mix session. But there is stuff in here that I would have solely used to finalize the master. So we'll start off this plugin, the API 2500. I was demoing it at the time, so I don't even have it anymore. But I initially had a solid bus comp doing a parallel compression, which still sounds really good, but this API just gives a really nice, super transient kind of sound to it. So that's why I use that one. I can't even play how it sounds anymore because the demo's expired, but just pretend that that's doing something cool. Ozone 8, oh, what's this? Ozone 8, okay, so I have a shit ton of stuff on here. This is, I would have probably used Master Assistant to get the basis up and then went from there, but we have an EQ doing some low cut and high boosting. I don't know, EQ kind of finding all the resonant frequencies that are a little bit ugly. So this dynamic compressor is not really doing it too much because I have another multi-dynamic compressor further in the chain, but it's just focusing on the different bands, so 20 to 132 hertz, 132 to 520, so on and so forth, and they're just compressing each band slightly differently. I brought the dry wet knob down pretty far. I think I just wanted a very slight bit of compression on these bands. I didn't want to do anything too over the top. Aside from that, we have an exciter, so analog on the bass, I boosted that heaps. We have another boost here, a boost here, and another boost on yeah, we're pretty much boosting a lot, maybe too much, but yeah, it sounds okay. This imager, this is what I do. I always bring this band down at 120 because anytime you're making a song, you're gonna have some bottom end frequencies slipping into the stereo image, and that's not something you really want unless you're doing it purposely. So for this case, we want all of the bass, kick, thump, all that kind of stuff to be just in the dead center. It just makes the most sense. It sounds better. Yeah, cutting out the lows. We have a very small boost in the mid-high and then another bigger boost on the high range just to give more stereo width. And the last thing is a maximizer. I don't actually think it's doing anything. Yeah, so there's no peaking here, so it's not even doing anything really. So that's Ozone, really, really powerful. We're going to Pultex, so I just use this to boost the low frequencies at 60 hertz and then an 8 kilohertz boost at 2 dB as well. And we have the API Vision Channel Strip. This is one of my favorite API stuffs, are really sick. This one I'm using to boost, again, the low frequencies, so 200 hertz, and then a boost at 5 kilohertz at 2 dB as well. I'm not doing anything else. I'm not doing any compression on this, just only the EQ here. We have another EQ. This is a preset I used, and I didn't even touch anything. It just sounded good. It was just doing some more multi-band EQ. So yeah, we have Pro Q here, doing some surgical EQ after all the other coloration I've added. I've done the mid-side stuff again. And we have Fab Filter. It's another tricky plugin, I would say. It kind of takes a little time to wrap your head around, but essentially it's just compressing the individual bands. Same thing as the Ozone one. It just has a, I kind of think it sounds a little bit better. I think you can push this one a bit harder than the Ozone one. That might just be me, but this one's mainly doing some high frequency limiting, because when you're producing this type of music, you end up having a lot of really harsh brightness in the song that sounds bad. So this thing is just taking care of any of those really bright transients as well as the rest of the song in that high frequency range. So I'm just going to play it for a little bit and you can watch the bands. Yeah, almost towards the end of it. We have a max bass, which is just boosting some of the mid-low frequencies that were kind of lacking, I found. We've kind of kept the original bass almost at its normal level, and the max bass is, you know, before, without this plugin. So yeah, pretty significant. Another Pro Q, I guess I decided I needed to cut and boost some more frequencies. This is a mid boost. These are stereo cuts. These are all stereo as well. So just more cuts and boosts to make it sound better. Red EQ, this one here, man, I just realized how much I have in this mastering chain. This is fucking ridiculous. Anyway, red EQ is just doing a high mid boost around 5.5, 6 kilohertz at 4 dB with a very broad notch here as well, just for colors, just for sound that I wanted. This is the final plugin before the limiter. This is just solely going to be catching any final high frequency content that might have slipped through any of these extra boosts and stuff like that, and all the other EQs that I added from the last multiband. So less for coloration and compression sound. This one's specifically just to catch anything before it hits the limiter. And the limiter, which is how ILLENIUM self-masters, he smashes these songs really hard. He usually brings the LUFS down to like 6 or 7 or maybe 5, I don't know. But if I play this, so I've got it about, yeah, around 7 to 8 during the chorus. You'd see that all those little red lines here, that's what it's basically limiting. But this preset here, you can't really hear the limiter. It's not a bad sound. And basically what he said and what he does is he pushes this as loud as he can till it starts to sound bad. So as soon as it starts to sound bad, he dials it back a little bit. So that's what I did here as well. I brought the limiter as loud as it can limit without sounding bad. And yeah, that's the whole master chain. Just a final thing I want to say is don't use this master chain as reference for your songs, because you never need to use this many channels, honestly. This would have just, the reason I have so much stuff on is when I first started this project, I was still kind of getting my head around his style a little bit more. So yeah, this project I think I worked on for about 3 months. So from the first month of that, I thought it sounded good, and then I came back with a fresh set of ears 2 months down and heard it wasn't as good as it could be. So then I started adding more and more plugins, and that's just kind of how I ended up with such a big master chain, is by doing that. So that's everything. I hope my air conditioner in the background wasn't too distracting. It's really hot in Australia right now. It's like 28 degrees and my house is boiling. But aside from that, I hope you learnt something from this. If you have any suggestions for what I should do next, if I should do a tutorial project on another artist, or if I should go explain more about mixing, or explain more about mastering, or explain more about producing, any of that, if you have any suggestions, just let me know. I'll read all the comments and I'll see what I can do. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.